Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today on our episode this week for Career Northstar. I am joined by Al and Jessica today. And for today's discussion, I wanted to focus on the topic of conflict resolution, specifically for early career professionals. As we all know, conflict in the workplace is unavoidable, especially early on in our careers. When I was preparing for this roundtable today, I did some research and I was looking for conflict management resources specifically for Gen Z, and there was really nothing out there. I found that most of the material that I was reading was geared toward senior leaders and managers, not for those that were just starting out. So I did come across one helpful article. It was from Harvard Business School that emphasizes the role that team members play in collaboration to resolve conflict. And so I thought that was a good place for us to start. And so today we'll talk about what workplace conflict actually looks like early in your career, how to identify it, number one. And then number two, why it can feel especially challenging sometimes early in our career. And then we'll discuss some practical tools to help the next generation approach conflict with confidence and leadership. So that's kind of the outline that we'll follow today for our roundtable, and we'll just jump right into it. But before we go through what conflict actually looks like in the workplace, I wanted to just kick off the discussion by asking a question, Jessica, actually to you. I would love to hear your opinion on why you think conflict is a little bit harder to navigate when you're newer in your career.
I think it starts with you're still building confidence. So when you're new, you're trying to prove yourself, you're trying to figure out your professional identity and place at work. So when a disagreement happens, when conflict comes up, it can feel very personal, like it's about you, your competence, or maybe even your reputation, even though I think most workplace conflict is just normal friction that pops up. So conflict can feel very personal, which, like I said, it's normal. It can feel like it's about you rather than just the situation. I think especially early in your career, because it's a new experience. It's the first time you're kind of navigating something like that. I think also you might not have the full picture yet, which is pretty difficult. You may not know the team dynamics or the history or just sort of the politics. And without that conflict, it's harder to read situations accurately, take yourself out of the picture because you don't see the bigger picture, right? Your context is sort of limited, so it can make navigating conflict pretty difficult when you don't really understand where someone is coming from, or maybe you don't fully understand the goal or that bigger picture, like I said. And then lastly, I think it takes practice, and you probably just haven't had much practice navigating conflict. And over time, you learn that healthy conflict can actually lead to better results. But early on, it can feel risky to speak up or to push back or navigate conflict. It can feel sort of heavier than maybe it really needs to be.
You brought up a really good point that we just don't have enough exposure to conflict early in our career, so it can feel a little scarier or harder to navigate. And that brings us into our first section of this roundtable, is identifying what conflict actually looks like. I jotted down a few examples, and then Al and Jess, I would love to hear from both of you on ways to identify conflict, and if you have any examples that you want to share with our listeners today. So the first kind of theme of conflict is miscommunication. I think especially in the world of work today, that can look like a lot of different things. There are so many methods of communication that we use daily in our jobs, whether it's written, verbal, in-person, phone calls, presentations, you name it. Like, you're in constant communication with your team. So it's really easy to miscommunicate, and that can lead to conflict a lot of times. The next one that I want to discuss and hear your thoughts on is especially for early career professionals, something that can cause conflict is feeling like you're left out of decisions. I think that this is something that I've 100% felt like in my career before. And I was wondering if we could maybe unpack that a little bit and understand why feeling left out of decisions at work can sometimes cause conflict.
Some of the miscommunications, I mean, you refer to really generally as we would call omni-mode communication, the many different modes of trying to communicate with somebody successfully. The second part of that is the generational, sort of the thing that we need to call out is the generational disconnect. So in today's world, most of the time, the Gen Z person is not the leader. The leader is a heritage leader, and the stereotypical miscommunication is actually kind of real in that the heritage leader, the previous generation leader, if you will, they really don't get many times the Gen Z way of communication in terms of compromise and collaboration. Those are the two biggies. I mean, you said it yourself previously about, you thrive best in a team environment. That's actually true. We know that for a fact. Well, at the other side of it, on the heritage side, if I don't quite get that as the leader, I'm going to practice an avoidance. So I'm going to kind of keep you at a distance. If we communicate like that, or we attempt to communicate like that, I can't understand you because you just want to, you're starved for collaboration and compromise. And I don't understand that. I'm just starved for get out of my way because I don't understand that. So I avoid. When the two practices like that, one that wants to come together and the other one that wants to pull apart, there's a natural gap there in terms of the communication that you talk about. So it's actually it's a tough one to kind of crack. It's a two-way street in this one, where both ultimately need to kind of come up a little bit on the scale to meet each other.
I think it requires intention and effort from both sides. I think both parties involved need to understand the other's communication style, but also even communication channels. Like some older generations may prefer face-to-face meetings or even a phone call, whereas like someone in a younger generation's Gen Z may prefer email or messaging about something. So I think understanding styles, but also preferred communication channels is important, and setting expectations as an early career professional with your leader to understand like how do they want you to communicate with them in different circumstances, and understand like how the people you're working with and your leader best receive information depending on the situation. I think that can help kind of help you to avoid any unnecessary conflict.
I appreciate your position, and I appreciate how you're trying to solution that together. Like, really, I do. It is a two-way street. If I'm just saying it, that it's just say as an example, I am the leader. If I don't understand you and I choose not to, like you keep coming to me and saying, kind of, here's what I need in order to do my best. If I keep coming to you or you keep coming to me like that, and I keep practicing that avoidance, that distance to you, which, I mean, Bridget, you mentioned the article, which we can put the link in for it, but it's part of that HBS article. If I keep practicing that, really both people get frustrated. The leader gets frustrated because it's like, oh my gosh, it's Jessica again. For goodness sakes, will you get away from me? I mean, let's be very transparent with each other. It's overkill. I don't want it. I don't need it. Just go do. If I'm on the Gen Z side of that, I'm saying, you know what? I'm trying the best I can here. I'm starting to get frustrated. And we also know from a data perspective, not just stereotypical, but from a data perspective, that Gen Z person is going to say, you know what? I need to go find my people who do want to compromise and collaborate and walk together on it. It really is a challenge, and I'm not refuting what you're saying. I'm saying I think there's two parts to that. One is there's got to be on the Gen Z side. The other has to be on the leader side, or both are going to get frustrated for the wrong, opposite reasons.
As a leader, I think you take responsibility for creating a safe, healthy environment where conflict can be addressed productively. Like if I'm the leader, I want my team to come to me when something isn't working, but that really only happens when trust and that safety are already in place. But without that foundation, people will, to your point, Al, get frustrated or will hesitate. And information is power. Like your team should feel confident and supported enough to bring you issues. It's going to benefit you to know what they're going through, allow you to remove obstacles, either ahead of time if they're coming to you with things or in the moment when they're already an issue, rather than them just staying silent or going through something on their own, which an early career professional could very well do if they're not taught early on from the beginning that they can go to you for help or for guidance.
The last part of what you said reinforces my point. I know you weren't disagreeing with it, but it reinforces the point. If I am, you both tell me, if I'm that Gen Z person, that worker, and I then get frustrated and I don't have the outlet or the confidence to then approach that leader, then what do you do? You're caught. Actually, you're no different really than anybody else. You start to feel sort of trapped isn't the right word, but like, where do I turn? Where do I turn at this point? And so it creates unhealthy conflict. You say, to your point, healthy conflict, totally cool. Like I always fostered healthy conflict in the team, because if we all had the same opinions all the time and took the same approach, we'd really never innovate anything. So you always had to drive and encourage healthy conflict, the differing of opinions, the differing of points of views, and the differing of solutions. And then you kind of wrestle that out, and then ultimately you come up with a solution, which more often than not is better. If I constrict that, if as the leader I constrict that through nobody's fault, right? It's not intentional. If it's unintentional and I do that, then I'm constricting innovation on the team and I'm frustrating parts of the team. And then those parts of the team that we talk about from a generational standpoint, they exhibit their frustration by leaving. And that's the part that you need to, or finding their people. And that's the point you need to avoid, at all costs. Not capital A as part of what we're talking, but avoidance, the verb kind of thing.
I would like to discuss how to know when a conflict needs to be addressed and how you can discern when you need to address it and work through it with your team or whoever you're conflicting with. So I think one way you can know when a conflict needs to be addressed, if it's repetitive, if it keeps happening, if it's impacting your work or your deliverables or your outcome. Those are two ways that I know you need to address it, because if it's happening over and over again, and then if it's impacting your work. But besides those two, are there any other ways you should really kind of, address the conflict at hand?
If it's affecting work performance, like if deadlines are slipping, if communication is breaking down. I also think if you notice a change in like team morale, if emotions are escalating, if tension is building, that's a big one. Resentment is forming. I think that's something that you just sort of pick up on, and there will be cues, right, that let you know that those things are taking place. That's what comes to my mind.
Now that we have some ways to address conflict, or know when to address conflict, I think we can go through and discuss some actionable steps to take when you have a conflict to address. So I have 3 that I'm just gonna go through really quickly, and then I want to open it up to the 2 of you if you have any thoughts or additions to these 3. So the first tool on how to handle conflict is to pause before reacting. We talked about this a little bit, but you don't want to respond from an emotional place when you're dealing with conflict. You want it to be very fact-based. You want to clarify what has actually happened and take away your feelings from it. Obviously, you're a person, you're going to have feelings attached to anything that you do, but taking your emotions out of the conflict and coming at it from a fact-based approach is really helpful. That's number 1, is pause before reacting. Number 2, and this is especially important for Gen Z and early career professionals, is to lead with curiosity when dealing with conflict, using kind of phrases such as "help me understand" and then discuss the conflict, or "can we talk through XYZ?" Those are really helpful ways to frame kind of getting to a solution for the conflict at hand. And I think Gen Z and early career professionals have a good place to do this because most of the times we're the newest on the team, or we have the least experience, where these questions or these ways of framing conflict resolution are very well received coming from Gen Z. So that's another one. That's number 2, is lead with curiosity when dealing with conflict. And then the final one that I have prepared is focus on the resolution, not winning. I think if you prioritize collaboration with your team over proving that your point is right, you will get to a resolution a lot faster. This is all about being a servant leader, coming to your team and understanding how you can help everyone move along and move away from the conflict. So focusing on that resolution and prioritizing collaboration is another way to move through conflict. So those are just 3 tools that I wanted to bring up with the both of you. But now I want to turn over to you if you have any tools number 4 or 5, or want to discuss any of the tools that we just talked about.
I think that collaboration and conflict really means treating the disagreement as a shared problem to solve, and it's going to be really useful to remember what you have in common with this person. Like, what is the shared goal? What is the shared problem that you're trying to solve? You're not trying to win the argument. It's not me versus you. It's about the outcome that we both want to get to. So if you can agree on that, like, outcome, you agree on what you have in common and the outcome that you're trying to get to, I think it makes things go a lot easier. So, define the problem together. Maybe you're aligned on the goal, but you have different paths of getting there. So I think, Bridget, you had mentioned curiosity before getting defensive. Like, really ask questions to try to understand their underlying concerns or motivations instead of immediately countering. We talked so much about the importance of listening more than you talk. And I think when conflict comes up, a lot of people just want to prove why they're right versus really wanting to understand where is the other person coming from, really trying to read between the lines. And you might actually find that you have way more in common with them than you think when you take it offline and just have like a transparent, open conversation with them where you're asking the who, what, when, where, why, how questions. Like, you're really trying to uncover the why behind the path that they want to take.
I can't augment them. I'll try to add to them. Is plan B. So assuming, with the assumption that this isn't like a bullying situation or recurring, but we have an opportunity or a business problem, and we're trying to solve it, and now we're going about it in very, very different ways. I think that all holds up. Everything that you talked about and described is like gold for our audience. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think also, I know, is there needs to be a plan B available Because if it is systemic behavior, if we keep running into the same walls, or you keep disregarding me and my point of view or my position, either implicit, or explicit bias, which can happen, you need to have that plan B at your disposal to say, you know what, at a certain point in time, I'm going to say, you know what, I'm going to try to stop meeting you and spend my energy or invest my energy elsewhere and actually go do, something else with it. It's not to say that you're going to pull the trigger when, there's like you have a bad day or something like that, but it always needs to be an option for you, especially if it's a systemic issue. Again, not an HR issue, but a disregard. Bridget, you talked about earlier, not being invited to a meeting, or not your voice. I'm putting words in your mouth actually right now. Your voice not being heard. With regard to perhaps something important or something that you're working on. Uncool. So, kind of smashing that all together is, you need to remain professional. You got it. Your dialogue, your point has to be direct every time, and it needs to be documented, which is everything that you said. This is the ripcord of, you know what, I'm spending more time managing the conflict than actually getting to the solution. That's the signal. That's the signal for you that you need to have that at your disposal.
I have a couple questions that I wanted to ask the both of you and just discuss. I know that our listeners and followers, like when we give some examples of things that we've experienced working with different teams. And so I have a couple questions, and either of you can answer and I can chime in as well. Number one, what is some advice a leader or a team member of yours gave to you that changed the way that you approach conflict?
When I had it practiced on me. The term is called triangulation. The term is triangulation when I'm trying to do the right thing, everything that you're talking about, like all the right things from a prescriptive standpoint. And I'm trying to do all of those right things to be heard because I do have something of value to offer. And to be disregarded or to be avoided, that we talked about. What happened to me was what now in modernity is called triangulation, where at a certain point, the leader wouldn't even talk to me because I was being too direct and too fact-based, back to your point, fact and data-based. And I want it to just be right. That's different than getting to the solution. I just want it to be right. And at a certain point, the leader got tired of that and did what's called triangulation, which is then went to someone else and said, you know what, go talk to this guy and talk this guy off the ledge, kind of thing. And avoided me from that point on. I didn't know what good looked like from a leadership standpoint yet, but how that made me feel, where my own leader didn't want to invest another minute in me based on facts and data and a direct professional approach. Trust was broken at that point. And again, I didn't know what good was yet, but boy, I certainly knew what bad looked like. And so I just did the opposite and evolved that over time. And I think it worked. I
think it's helpful to see these tactics in action, whether it's learning from a team member or a leader, and it makes you drawn to those people and want to be like them. And that made me think of just a tactic I've learned from my other team members that everyone does, or most people do. I know, Jessica, you do this really well too, is when there's a conflict, it's a great time to make sure everything is in writing. I think that's a huge thing because it's easy to say, oh, I didn't say that when you're on a call and everybody hangs up and then immediately forgets what was discussed. But if you have something in writing with commitments that you can follow up on and everybody has notes after, it makes things a lot easier and also helps move things along when you're trying to solve a conflict. So if there's a mismatch in priorities or responsibilities, and you're actively discussing that and working through that with your team or other team members, whatever it is, it's helpful to create a paper trail and make sure that you're moving in the right direction. And it also helps you indicate progress, to show that the conflict is coming to a resolution. So I've seen that, done by multiple team members, and it's helpful. And I try to do that kind of proactively now. When I sense a conflict coming on, it's good to get ahead of it and write things down. Okay, I have one more question for the both of you, and then we can wrap up. This is another example one. My question, or I guess it's not a question, it's more of just asking for an example. I wanted to figure out or discuss if either of you had an example of a conflict that was escalated because you or a member of your team reacted too quickly to the situation and wanted to see what happened.
I just want to reiterate like the importance of really pausing before reacting and maintaining a level of professionalism. I know that it's happened to me before, especially earlier in my career, when someone was providing feedback or, something needed to be redone about a deliverable that I was working on. And it's easy to take it personally and maybe even get a little bit emotional and defensive, like defend why you did it the way that but it's like, it doesn't really actually matter. The goal is a deliverable that needs to be completed for whatever the expectations are for the deliverable. But I just think it's important to not take things personally and then try to defend why you did something a certain way and get overly emotional about it. That pause and like take a deep breath, don't make assumptions, make sure that you have all your facts in a row is so important before then responding.
She's about 10 times smarter than I am. Maybe 15. So I have two examples. One for our Gen Z colleagues and one for everybody, leadership standpoint as well. So for me, as you had asked, there were plenty of times across my career, both as an individual contributor and as a leader, where, you know what, there was a certain point in time where it's not getting done. And one time in particular that immediately comes to mind, we're in a client meeting, the project manager who's delivering the messaging to the client simply isn't getting it done, doesn't know their content, doesn't know their audience, kind of mailed it in and was kind of hoping for the end of the meeting. And the client caught him. On him. What do you mean by that? And they sat there frozen. And what ended up happening is I jumped in and I don't want to say rescued, but preserved the meeting with sort of some consulting 101. Hey, we appreciate the question. Give us 24 hours. Let's get back to you. We have part of the answer. Let me give you what we have right now, and then we can go get the rest of it. And we'll send that back to you in writing, back to your point. So that was the scenario. So kind of like de-escalated it. When we were done, I took that project manager outside. We went outside and we had a very one-way conversation. And as you can imagine, and I had exhausted myself, kind of punched myself out, if you will, and said, now answer me for yourself. Answer, right? Like, what is happening with you? And the project manager said, I just got a phone call right before the meeting. They had to put my dog down. And so, of course, I'm sort of on the back foot. And I said, well, why didn't you say anything to me? And the response was, I was afraid you would think less of me. That like I couldn't come into the meeting and command the meeting, and separate, who I am as a human being kind of thing. And it of course, I felt this big after that. But the point was to it is, Jessica, to your point, instead of me, so the lesson is, instead of me as the leader being on the attack, rather, why don't you take a step back and say, number one, what happened? Number two, you saw I have your back in that. Number three, now how do we make this better? Right? I jumped right to the you're terrible and right. So that's the leadership side. Does that make sense? Let me pause for comments or on that. Okay. From the other side of it, I experienced it. We were at again, we were in a client project, and for me, it was all about we've got to get this done. We've got to move ahead faster for a variety of reasons. But the whole point of it was that the team wasn't on board with me. And so I was kind of on my own and on an island, and sort of being very impetuous and still trying to prove myself. I kind of went off on my own, and they taught me a very valuable lesson. They let me. And so when it came time for that, client deliverable or milestone, whatever we were trying to achieve, I completely missed the mark, like completely. And they fed it back to me, and it was both implicit and explicit with that. Like, I think you're going to get that this is a team sport now, and I think you need to listen more than you talk, kind of thing, and you need to learn more than you teach. And so the lesson from that is, you have to be able to also read the room. And you have to be able to practice your craft really in the confines, good or bad, in the confines of like what the environment is. Because if you don't, even if you're doing great work, you're the outlier, right? And that's a bad place to be. And all it does is invite conflict.
I think the theme of both of those examples is you took something away from both of them and grew in your approach to dealing with conflict. And I think that is the mindset that we're trying to promote here today on this episode, is take conflict as a growth opportunity, an opportunity for you to test things out and be creative in your roles, because when a conflict is handled well, it's an opportunity for you to grow and get more responsibility at work. And I think that those examples show that you're learning and growing while you're dealing with conflict. So my parting advice is to not run away from conflict, but accept it and understand that you have the tools to grow from it and solve it with all of the right things in mind. So I think that's it. We'll call it there for today. Thank you for joining us.
Great roundtable.
Great. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.